Hey, welcome to This Week in Pharmacy. I'm your host, Todd Urey, founder of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. What a week has it been? And you see special microphone flag, Access 25. Assembia 2025 was amazing. We just got back. It's just been over, not even 24 hours. We cannot wait to talk to you today. This Week in Pharmacy, May 2nd, 2025. We're going to be talking about a big show, organ donation and cybersecurity. You are not going to want to miss this episode. Extremely interesting. Stay tuned for This Week in Pharmacy. Hey there, hey there, hey there. Hope your week has been good. Hope it's been as good as mine. I had an amazing time in Vegas with people from Assembia that attended Assembia. Shout out to our sponsors who helped us get there. Dr. First, thank you so much, Colin Banaz. I can't wait for you to hear this interview with him. Very interesting things coming from Dr. First will impact patient care. Definitely will impact specialty pharmacy and access to information. Once again, shout out to Dr. First. Thank you so much for sponsoring us. Also, Lumacera Health Services. We're going to be talking to Eric Huckins. Dr. Huckins is on the show. They are sponsoring our coverage of Access 2025, and we appreciate them so much. I am excited to talk about This Week in Pharmacy's podcast features first, just right out of the gate. For all you listeners, before we get into our features, we actually have a special message from Rob Kress, the Godfather of Functional Pharmacy. But before that, let's talk about health partners and Perfecting Peds. The Perfecting Peds team, a team of pharmacists led by Jenna Quinn, has used their subject matter expertise to approach health plans to change the game. And I'm excited about this. I'm excited about being a small part of it. We are their public relations agency, RxPR. We use podcasting to blow up your public relations and you're expanding your brand, your mission. We're going to continue doing that. A shout out to Marina Boskov, Dr. Boskov's Holistic Pharmacy podcast is doing extremely well. She's making a lot of interesting episodes through the guests that she's bringing in, optimizing health and living longer. This is a data-driven discussion, really interesting discussion that came out this week. Also, a shout out to Katrina Azur and Dr. Scott Stewart. This latest episode of the PharmExcel podcast has a special announcement that they're going to be launching a different podcast, a different series, but they talk about faith and leadership, being pharmacists, and what their faith means to them. I think this is an important episode. Excited to have them as part of our network. Want you to connect with both Scott and Katrina. Katrina was a Pharmacy 50 most influential. She is out of New Zealand. She is just amazing and doing amazing things. We had that pharmacogenomics webinar that we did together, and it was wonderful to be pushing pharmacogenomics in pharmacy, in the pharmacy sector. A shout out to our partners with GRX Marketing in the partner spotlight of AXRX. Interesting talk around marketing and how important marketing is, and how it's under invested in many cases, especially through pharmacies that are so busy, long-term care pharmacies, specialty pharmacies. The realm of our community independence. You don't have to go it alone. We have organizations out here that are helping with your marketing, actually outsourcing and doing some turnkey projects. As I said, just got back from Access 25, Access to Pharmacy. A shout out to Chris Benz and the Assembia team putting together a amazing time together with everyone that we got to meet. We had over 20 interviews that we're going to be building into a 3-part series. So be on the lookout, be on the sound out, or should I say, open your ears. It's coming down the pike. And this is just one of a picture of one of my interviews and just excited to share with you Christopher leading Cassian RX. It's a really interesting interview. You're going to want to pay attention to the infrastructure that they talk about and how that's going to accelerate specialty pharmacies as well as pharmacy in general. You're not going to want to miss that. All right, so just getting right into news because there's a lot going on. I don't have enough time today to get into some of what's happening throughout the nation. But one thing that I wanted to pick up on was the pharmacy deserts. I've said this. You can go back a whole year ago, if not almost 2 years ago, with some of our programming, definitely on TWIRx, where we said that the pharmacy deserts are going to get worse before it gets better. And we're still seeing the disintegration of healthcare, of public health access throughout the nation. And this article comes from Mission Local. Local news, and it's missionlocal.org. And the article is Blockbuster Pharmacy Lines at Last, Walgreens in the Mission. And this goes into how these lines are horrible. 23rd and Mission Street, and how the people of just throughout the nation, not just here in this article, but if you read into this and you think of how many places in the United States are experiencing longer lines because of the shutting down of our pharmacies, and those pharmacies had to shut down because the PBMs and the new PBM models, not the new ones, the existing PBM models have crippled the pharmacy industry in many, many ways. And just take a read to this of how it's the independent pharmacies that are going to be doing a lot of stepping up and try to give access to pharmacy services to people throughout our nation. But once again, this is not just in one location. It's not just happening in small towns in Madison, Wisconsin, or Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or somewhere in Orlando, Florida, and the outskirts of Orlando and the country areas. It's happening throughout the entire nation. And like I said, I think it's unfortunately going to get worse before it gets better. Hey, we do have one of our parts of our feature today is going to be talking about cybersecurity. I want to bring this to your attention. I want to set the stage for this before we get into our first interview. And I'd like to open up. This just came out today. This says, and it comes from Pharmacy Practice News, and the title is AI and cyber attacks ranked as significant threat to patient safety. So once again, artificial intelligence and cyber attacks are ranked as significant threats to patient safety. This is written by Gina Shaw, and I'd like you to read this article. Once again, Pharmacy Practice News just came out on May 2nd. Today's TWIRx, we're going to be talking about this. And before we do, I'd like to feature Darshan Kulkarni, who's been part of our network for years, and his insights on AI and on cyber threats and pharmacists. What does that mean for our pharmacists? Let's take a quick listen from Darshan.
In a digital world where convenience is king, the recent cybersecurity breach at United Health and Change Healthcare has thrown a wrench into the gears of pharmacy operations nationwide, leaving pharmacists and patients scrambling. This isn't a hiccup, it's a wake-up call. Pharmacies found themselves in a bind as prescription processing delays affected countless individuals. The root of the problem? A cybersecurity issue points to a growing concern in the pharmacy sector: the vulnerability of our aging digital infrastructure. But it's not just about the inconvenience. The situation sheds light on the legal, regulatory, compliance minefield that pharmacies must navigate. Data breaches not only compromise patient confidentiality, but they also raise significant legal implications regarding data protection laws and healthcare compliance standards. Pharmacies now are on high alert to tighten their defenses, not just to protect patient information, to safeguard themselves against potential legal repercussions and financial repercussions. So, what can pharmacists do to fortify their defenses against such cyber threats? First and foremost, invest in robust cybersecurity measures. This is non-negotiable. This means stronger encryption methods, regular security audits, ensuring all staff are trained in cyber hygiene practices, establishing a clear protocol for responding to data breaches, minimizing damage, and complying with legal requirements like in HIPAA and in certain cases some state laws about reporting such incidents. Now, pharmacists must also be informed about the latest cybersecurity trends and threats. For that, reach out to me. I'm happy to help. But this proactive approach involves subscribing to cybersecurity newsletters, attending relevant workshops, and possibly even collaborating with both IT and legal experts specialized in the healthcare sector. Where does one even start with this? That's where Darshan Kulkarni, me, and the Kulkarni law firm come into play. I work at the intersection of pharmacy, law, and technology. I'm not just a lawyer, I'm a strategic ally in navigating the complex world of pharmacy law and cybersecurity. Whether it's developing compliance strategies, handling the aftermath of a data breach, or simply ensuring that your pharmacy is up to date with the latest regulations, Kulkarni Law Firm is your frontline defense. I'm a pharmacist. I've been on the front lines, and I hope that I can help pharmacists like you not only prevent cybersecurity issues, but also help operate within the bounds of the law, avoiding hefty fines and protecting your reputation. In this era of digital pharmacies, staying ahead means being prepared. Don't wait for the next cybersecurity breach to rethink your defenses. Reach out to me, Darshan Kulkarni, now at the Kulkarni Law Firm at 302-252-6959. That's 302-252-6959. Or email me at darshan@kulkarnilawfirm.com. That's KULKARNI lawfirm.com.
Hey, this week in pharmacy, we do have a special segment. We're going to be talking with Gary Salman, and really it's about cybersecurity specifically. Everybody remembers the nightmare that Change Healthcare went through, and the cyber attack continues to have fallout and implications to processing, to switching. Gary, it's good to have you here because I personally understand cybersecurity from back in the days when I used to sell managed hosting services, goodness gracious, 1996 through 2003. And our data centers were really the hub of security, where we had devices and software. I remember the IP640 or something from some manufacturer, Digex, some router, but triple des encryption. So like we've come a long way. So introduce yourself to our listeners and your background as well as your intensity around healthcare cybersecurity.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Honored to be here today. So I've been in the IT healthcare space and cyber world since probably around the same time as you, actually. Let's call it the early 90s. I built my career developing software for the healthcare space. And then in the late 90s, I was like, what am I doing selling servers and all this stuff? There's this thing called the internet. And I literally told my engineers, go hook these servers up to the internet and let's see if we can connect to them. And literally within months, we had a working solution. And, we were having some of our clients do beta testing and actually running their management systems through the internet. And then by the year 2000, cyber events, obviously they're nothing like they are today, started to come to reality, right? And when we were like, oh, hackers are breaking into these networks and they're using these computers to attack other networks. So we actually deployed a really high-end Cisco solution called an intrusion protection system. And then a couple months later, the Cisco actually triggered and locked out thousands of healthcare users from our cloud-based system. And that was my first real wake-up call where I was like, wow, this is playing with fire, right? We have millions of patient records in these systems, and if someone gets in there, they could do a lot of damage. So from the year 2000 to around now, I've been heavily involved in the healthcare cybersecurity space. Majority of our clients are in healthcare, and we really focus on helping prevent intrusions through various testing methodologies and techniques. But we're also a full incident response company, Todd. So I'm dealing firsthand with ransomware attacks, email intrusions, theft of data, And unfortunately, a lot of banking and wire fraud now is becoming really prevalent. Actually, if you look at some of the data, it's worse than ransomware. Obviously, the ramifications may not be as bad if patient data is not taken; you just lose money. But yeah, we're seeing the full scope of these events and the damage that's actually being done to these healthcare entities and pharmacies.
So the United Healthcare issue through Change Healthcare really sent a ripple effect through the healthcare technology and cybersecurity industry. And it's still trying to be figured out, in my opinion, as a mini conspiracy theorist. I think they know what happened. I don't think they want to admit it because of all their contracts and all the responsibility. But one thing that I do understand, just from my years, even being in telecommunications back in the day as well, is you shouldn't have one point of failure. And I think that the contracts and the way that Change Healthcare is set up with so much of the control of what they have and moving payment to make sure that physicians getting paid, pharmacies are getting paid. We need to kind of I almost think of the world of some kind of other Bitcoin setup infrastructure chain link environment where you
Right.
never have one point of failure. You could always have like a backup. But what do you think of the blockchain entry into technology and helping to mitigate the risk of cyber attacks?
Look, I think there's a lot of companies trying to figure that out in terms of how do we leverage blockchain for the healthcare world. I have not seen it implemented successfully anywhere. And it also requires a tremendous amount of computing power to manage the blockchain, et cetera. So ideally, Todd, yeah, I mean, you're spot on. If there's a way to do that, amazing. I think we're many years away from seeing that. And it's one of those technologies that if we could use it, people would be jumping all over it. But I think, some companies have just started to try and like, this isn't going to work, and look, trying to rebuild a lot of these systems to work in the blockchain is a nightmare. I mean, if you look at the healthcare space in general, some of these technologies are 10, 15 years, behind the times. And that's just unfortunately where it is. And then the big players, they're kind of happy with what they have. And there's not a lot of incentive to modify them to address the blockchain issue. But it's definitely a good thought.
What are your thoughts around divesting the points of failure, which create once again huge collapses in what we just talked about with regards to Change Healthcare? What do we set up for security to ensure that if something does get attacked, we have an ability to shift traffic, we have the ability to shift something else in getting information to the right spots so that we don't have this happen again?
Yeah. So look, a lot of these companies do have backups and redundancies and failovers, but typically what we see, I mean, pick even Fortune 100 companies, right? A lot of these cyber events are systemic, right? The hackers, the threat actors are taking out the entire infrastructure. And if you think about the amount of infrastructure required to support the current customer base or the current solution, and then think about, if we have to fail that over to another solution, you basically have to have double infrastructure, right, to be able to support it. And, when these threat actors get into these environments, these cloud-based technologies, they will often persist in the environment for weeks. And what they're going to do is they're going to learn everything they can possibly learn about regarding that infrastructure. They're going to find, where the primary servers are, where the backups, where's the redundancy, right? What type of data is in this environment? How can I steal all the data before I set off the fire alarms and network defenders start blocking me? So there's a lot going on here. I've worked in a lot of cloud technologies, especially in the healthcare space. And it really comes back to that simplistic statement, which is it's very, very expensive to have duplicative infrastructure. And even if you have duplicative infrastructure, that doesn't mean the threat actors can't, weave their way into that and damage that too. Because they know in the end, if you can get your system back up and running, right, and they haven't taken the confidential patient data, most likely the victim is not going to pay the ransom. So their goal in these attacks is to do as much damage as possible, restrict the ability to bring the systems back online, and most importantly is steal all the data. And that's how they get you, right? And unfortunately, when I look at a lot of these bigger attacks, that's typically the case.
When I think of lessening cybersecurity, and I think of our pharmacy owners listening right now, I think of our VPs of pharmacy and health systems and hospital systems and specialty pharmacy and all the facets. It starts, it's almost like, where do you start? Well, the best place to start is yourself and thinking,
Yep.
what little practices am I doing or not doing in the realm of email, in the realm of leaving my computer open, in realm of putting passwords in place that might be exposed to somebody walking around. So the best practices in cybersecurity, in my opinion, start with me first. And when I say me, I mean you listening right now. It starts with you. And then therefore, then it kind of like folds out, and then you start relying on infrastructure and your security team and protocol and laws. And but what's your advice for our pharmacy owners and our directors and people that are there from that personalization perspective?
Yeah, look, I think you're spot on. When we look at security risk, we typically start with the people, right? Because they do conceptually present the highest risk. And if you look at the data from companies like us, incident response companies, or the insurance carriers, you'll see somewhere between 60 and 70% of intrusions into networks is through the people. And that's typically through phishing, spear phishing. These are typically called social engineering scams, right? The trickery. And it's going to start with an email that appears to be coming from someone you know or trust, or a vendor or supplier, asking you to do something like click on a link, download something, or a lot of times now it's, hey, we need your Microsoft 365 credentials, log in here. Oh, and by the way, we just sent you your MFA code. Can you punch that in too? And last week I saw that. We had a doctor, at a medical group give up his MFA code to a threat actor. And everyone's like, who would do something like that? But the reality is a lot of people do, right? They're like, oh, that's from my colleague, at that, pharmacy down the street, or that practice down the street. They wouldn't do anything malicious to me, but their account was compromised and the hacker sent an email out of their real account. So I think a lot of people will be like, oh, I'll outsmart the hackers, but the hackers get better and better every single day. So it does start with training, right? And under federal law, HIPAA, you have to implement cybersecurity awareness training for anyone that is touching basically a computer, right? That has access to this electronic protected health information. And that type of training that educates and creates awareness around cyber events is extremely powerful. I'll argue that a well-trained human still beats some of the best technology out there to detect these phishing emails, right? And it's not only clicking of information and giving up credentials, it's wire fraud. If someone is in charge of paying bills, whether you own your pharmacy or you have an accounts payable person, there's a lot of trouble, and issues around wire fraud, where a hacker will send you an invoice that looks like it's coming from a legitimate supplier, or that legitimate supplier had their email compromised, and they send you an invoice and the routing information, right? The ACH information's been modified. And all of a sudden you send out a $25,000, $100,000, or for larger ones, millions of dollars to the wrong bank information, ABA and bank account number, and you may never get that money back. And the insurance carriers are cutting back reimbursements on that because it's just so prevalent. So it starts with solid training, ongoing training. I always suggest you do simulated phishing, where you're actually testing, the pharmacists and all of the employees to see if they're actually clicking on things. Typically, cyber companies will set this up for you and manage it. That's a really, really strong process. And as I alluded to, required, and God forbid you have an issue at your pharmacy and the Office for Civil Rights comes in to conduct an investigation, one of the things they're immediately going to ask for is like, show me proof that you train people on these threats. I think the second way that networks are broken, well, not, I don't think, I know. Let me rephrase that. The second way networks are broken into is through vulnerability exploitation. And in the most, basic form of vulnerability is a defect in a piece of hardware or a piece of software that a threat actor will exploit to gain access to a network. It could be a misconfiguration or a defect on the firewall. And if you have a defect on your firewall, that hackers scan your firewall sometimes hundreds of times per day. Like if you pulled your firewall logs, you would be horrified by the number of attacks that are executed against that device. And all it takes is an IT company or an IT resource to accidentally misconfigure something, or leave a port open, or try and hide something thinking the hackers won't find it. The hackers within hours will exploit it, and all of a sudden they land on your network, inside your network, and now it's game on, right? The hackers are getting so good, they will often evade your antivirus software. They'll steal all of your confidential information. And then typically the last part of the attack is the execution of the ransomware. And that's where maybe your antivirus stops it, maybe it doesn't. So, scanning your firewalls for vulnerabilities and for open ports every single day is not a nice to have anymore. You have to do this. And the same thing applies inside the network. When a hacker gets into your network, they're going to run very similar tools that a company like ours would run to look for vulnerabilities and figure out, hey, what's wrong with this network? How can I basically leapfrog from computer to computer, ultimately getting at the data I want? And they're going to run vulnerability scans, and they're going to map the network, and they're going to do this within minutes. And if you haven't managed vulnerabilities and eliminated those vulnerabilities that allow a hacker to exploit that computer, then once again, it's completely game on for the hackers, and they'll just, administrate their way through the network. Like, they'll literally get the administrative account very quickly, and now they have full access to everything, right? Like, they're your IT resource. So internal vulnerability scanning, external vulnerability scanning is so critical. And if you look at the new regulations that Health and Human Services has put out over the last couple months, they actually now call out the fact that you must do vulnerability scanning, you must do penetration testing, right? We've been pushing this for 8 years, and we had many IT resources laughing like, oh, who's gonna get beyond a firewall? The hackers don't do that. I have my firewall configured properly. And they just didn't understand, the importance of this type of technology to defend the networks, right? A good network defender, cybersecurity companies always say, what we're going to do is we're going to make it as difficult as possible to get into the network, right? That's through vulnerability management and some other processes. And if that fails, then we're going to hope that the antivirus software stops the attack. So you can leave the front door of your pharmacy wide open at 12 o'clock at night and leave a dog in there and hope that if someone gets in the front door, the dog's going to bite them, or the guy's going to break in and throw a hot dog to the dog and he's going to clean out the shelves. Right. So that's kind of the philosophy of what we're doing, is like, we're going to harden that. We're going to bolt those doors. We'll pull the gates down in front of your pharmacy. And if someone takes out a blowtorch and cuts through it and they get in, then, we're going to hopefully be able to respond accordingly. But I think that's the philosophical difference, that's going on right now.
The name of the company is Black Talon Security. This is Gary's organization. He's meticulous. Reach out to him on LinkedIn, active on LinkedIn, last name Salman, Salman. Gary, promise that you will take time to come back on This Week in Pharmacy. Let's dig into some other issues that security can have on the realm of healthcare and pharmacy business. And for people that are interested, blacktalonsecurity.com. Once again, it's blacktalonsecurity.com. This has been a memorable, starting to bring back memories from my dual router contracting days back at AT&T Infrastructure when we were doing it in Pittsburgh. And I can't believe I can say I used to sell frame relay services before the internet. Like, I didn't even sell internet service because that was considered like something cool that only the companies that could afford a little website or internet back in the mid 90s. That's crazy to actually even say that, making me sound old.
Oh, I haven't heard frame relay probably in 30 years. That's pretty funny. Making me feel old now also.
I know. Thank you so much for being on This Week in Pharmacy.
You got it.
All right, hey everyone. Back with another episode of This Week in Pharmacy. Here with an episode of Beyond the Labs as well. Maybe a dabbling of man unmedicated. Anyway, Rob Kress here, and coming from what we're going to call today my office, which is often the case. And I want to talk to you because a lot of you are pharmacists. And as you know, I run a coaching and mentoring practice on helping pharmacists implement and grow functional medicine practices. Now, I want to talk to you today about a distinct difference I'm going to have a couple of these, but there's a big difference between having a job, especially a pharmacist job, and being an entrepreneur. And there are some things that you need to keep in mind that I suggest that you do. Now, think about it. When we have a pharmacist job, as much as we might not love it as much as we do, whatever, I do see a lot of people coming to me because they're just disenchanted with the conventional medicine system and they're looking for a different way out. A lot of them ask, how can I get a functional pharmacist job? Well, they're not really out there, to be honest with you. I coach people on creating their own coaching practice or doing collaborations, which could be part of that with other practitioners. And it can be very successful. And there's other tips I'll give you as far as how you can scale it. So, you're not always in the startup mode. But what I want to talk to you about today was, let me track back. So, a job is security. A job is guaranteed hours. A job is usually a guaranteed pay or salary. A job is often paid vacation, health benefits, and all that stuff. So a lot of people I coach with at first, they're holding on to either their full-time job or when they feel comfortable, they step down to maybe 3 days a week or something like that. So there's this hybrid mode. And we can do one of two things. I'll tell you my path. I had 1 foot in and 1 foot out for many, many years until the universe kind of came knocking and helped me push me right into entrepreneurship 100%. And, there's something that happens. You motivate more, you motivate quicker out of necessity. So I've actually straddled that line and I've been in both places, what it's like to have a job as well as what it's like to be an entrepreneur and be responsible for everything. So before we dive into all that, I want to talk about a quote by the great psychotherapist, psychologist, Carl Jung. And it said something to the fact of, I'm going to paraphrase it here. What was it that you did as a child that allowed the hours to pass like minutes? Well, herein lies the key or an ingredient to your earthly pursuits. So what does that mean? That basically means, what have you done at some point in your life where you lost track of time because you were engrossed in it, you were loving it, you were lit up by it, you were in the zone. And your earthly pursuits is your career, it's your purpose and your meaning. Now, purpose and meaning is beyond what a job usually offers. That's another reason people come into my coaching and mentoring programs, because they want to develop something of that range. I mean, it's something that we do with our personal health clients as well. So for me, believe it or not, as a kid, what it would be being in an area like this. It would be in the woods. I would spend hours in there and it would feel like minutes. I'd be late for dinner. I'd be getting lost. And it's where I just enjoyed being. Now, I also want to offer a caveat. Sometimes, and I've spoken to some people, which they haven't had the most pleasant childhoods. And oftentimes they didn't have those spaces or that feeling, whether it was from just lack of support, lack of love, even abuse. So this is a question I want you to delve into for yourself. And then my question would be, maybe there's something at another point in your life. Maybe if you didn't have a great childhood, when you finally got out of the house and were on your own for the first time, maybe something came up then. I was talking to K Corpus MD, my partner, and we were at her house the other day doing a lot of yard work, and she recognized that gardening and yard work is that thing for her. Now, she didn't do it as a child, but nowadays she realizes she just loses track of time, and it's really enjoyable. So, that's step one, right? What is that thing for you? Now, step two is, how can I integrate that into my earthly pursuits, right? My career, my job, my practice, my purpose, and my meaning, and why I do what I do. Now, I can only give you my example. I'll give you other examples. But for me, and this is very interesting because there was a time in my life that I did that, but I had a job. So I lived in Jackson, Wyoming for the better part of a decade. And, you know, it's a nature's playground. And my first place that I had was in town on Millward, just by Snow King. So the morning I'd find myself 4 or 5 in the morning, hiking up to the top of the mountain, oftentimes with my dog Hannah, my chocolate lab. And that was medicine for me. Now, then as a couple years went on, I moved down by the new post office. I was by Pathways, had a twin home there. And once again, I was able to hike right up on that mountain, and it would be on the other side, but it was endless hours of hiking on a day off. So, you know, the job afforded me these days off for time to do it. And was the job rewarding? Was it fulfilling? No, it wasn't. It's part of the reason I left there. So that was one of my 1 foot in, 1 foot out. At least I was 100% in job, but I was able to enjoy something I really immensely loved as a child, something similar to it, but it wasn't key to my earthly pursuit. So part of the reason living there was what I really want to do in life, what I want to do that's more meaningful, that's for me. And I knew entrepreneurship had a key to it. I did not know what to expect, but as years went on, there were things like I opened my own pharmacy, clinical nutrition practices, marketing practices, coaching practices. For many, many years, I was kind of living 1 foot in, 1 foot out, as I alluded to, until the universe said, you know what, Rob, it's time to be a 100% entrepreneur, and kind of forced me into it, so I hustled. So what I recognized when I came across this quote, because sitting in the functional medicine practice that we have, a lot of times I'm virtually working with clients on video calls, but I'm also assessing labs, creating protocols, and sending them to them. Now, for me to be inside at a desk, even if it's in the comfort of my own home, for many hours a day, it's almost like the death of me. So there needs to be balance. So what are other aspects? So this is step 2. How can you incorporate this into your earthly pursuits? Because the really cool thing about a functional lifestyle medicine practice, there's a lot of different ways you can go with it. For instance, Kay and I, we have done forest therapy walks with our friend Georgia out of Nashville, Tennessee. She's actually come up to this park here, which is John James, and we've led a forest therapy walk with our clients, which is incredible. I have met people out on the trail on appointments to work through things. So this is all part of it. I've met people at Kay's office in the parking lot to give primal movement examples. So there's a lot of things that I can do to get myself outdoors. Now, particularly right now, which is interesting, I'm on the clock. I'm creating content that's going to support my branding, my growth, and my reach. Because you're probably going to hear this through Todd Uri and the Pharmacy Podcast Network and other avenues on my social media. And yes, I'm going to have a call to action that's going to say, if you're ready to step on this entrepreneurial journey and get into the most beyond and targetedly focused mentoring and functional and coaching program based on functional medicine and beyond, you want to sign up right now. So back to that. When I'm out on this trail, it's kind of like my office. I get ideas, I get in creativity, I create outlines, and then I'll go home and I'll sit at my computer for maybe 30 minutes and I'll start that creation process. From there, I'll pass it off to someone who works for me for them to pretty it up, make it more into a product, a book, whatever it might be. So I just want to share with you that when you are stepping onto the path of being an entrepreneur, I really want you to hold that one key quality, that quote by Carl Jung, in mind, and think about, what was it in my life that would make hours pass like minutes. Hope I got that right before. And how can I integrate that into my life pursuits which is not just a job, but is a practice, could be in collaboration, could be entrepreneurship, can also, but that offers that purpose and that meaningfulness in life that we're looking for. So that's the tip. Hope y'all have a great one.
This episode is sponsored by Independent Pharmacy Cooperative, widely known as IPC. Established in 1983, IPC is the nation's largest group purchasing organization owned by independent pharmacy. With a mission of maximizing the success of community pharmacists, IPC works to provide members with access to effective programs and services designed to enhance profitability for independent pharmacy. Read more about our mission by checking out our website at ipcrx.com. That's ipcrx.com.
Hey, special segment on This Week in Pharmacy. Lots of things happening in our world. My goodness. As you all know, you've been listening. We're headed to Assembia, I call it the business Super Bowl of specialty pharmacy. Excited about that. We get to tap into other sources of communications that are impacting healthcare. Donate Life RX. I'm excited about this opportunity. In talking with Aisha Tater, Executive Director of Donate Life in New York, and also Assembly Member John McDonald III, Assembly District 108. And then the President of Kinney Drugs, John Marafa Jr. I want to welcome all of you to This Week in Pharmacy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so pharmacy owner, I always have my favorites. So that's got to be you, John, as president of Kinney Drugs. So tell me a little bit about, right out of the gate, for our listeners as well, why'd you want to be in the pharmacy business?
I'm a pharmacist by training, so I spent most of my adult career practicing as a pharmacist, and then I had this great opportunity to come and join Kinney Drugs and lead their 95 drugstore chain, mostly in New York, and we have 21 pharmacies in the state of Vermont too. So it's always been a passion of mine. My older sister's a pharmacist, so it kind of felt right.
It's kind of a pedigree of your family and part of your a pharmacy world. Yeah, I've been in since 2004. I've learned so much from pharmacists and the underutilization of pharmacists in many cases, not so much like in specialty where you can really hone in on, but definitely community and our retail chains. Sometimes their process and their workflow never gives us the time to truly dip in and care. And that's why I'm excited about today's interview, to talk about the exciting new initiative that you're all working on together. And before we kick this off, I do want to go back to introductions of each of you to kind of give just a little background, just like we started out with our favorite because he's a pharmacist and pharmacy owner. But Aisha, let's go to you just as executive director of Donate Life.
Sure. So I've been the executive director of Donate Life New York State for 13 years. We have had some really significant progress here in New York. We work on increasing organ and tissue donations so that we have about 8,000 New Yorkers that are waiting for a transplant today. So it's been an exciting ride, and we have a lot more work to do. But I'm really excited to be here and talk to you all about Donate Life RX.
Thank you so much for being here. Want to shout out to Assembly District 108 Representative John McDonald. It's so important. I've had Buddy Carter on our show so many times down in Georgia and helping to lead with PBM reform. It is so critically important that we have people in policy development and political leadership who understand the true issues that are happening and what's happening in healthcare overall and the intricacies of pharmacy overall. Give our listeners a little bit of your background as well, Representative McDonald, and let us know kind of your passion about this. That's why you're here today.
Thanks, Todd, and thanks for the opportunity. Listen, I graduated, believe it or not, I'm celebrating 40 years out of the Albany College of Pharmacy here in New York in the capital. And I wasn't a child prodigy, so you can figure out how old I am. But I've also been very fortunate. I was a pharmacy owner up until 2 or 3 years ago. We deliberately, because of transition planning, sold our pharmacy, which is now in its 95th year, and it's still doing well. I actually still practice pharmacy. Not a lot, maybe a couple hours a day, just to kind of, I do what managers and owners do. You just take care of things, right? But I've been very blessed, to be mayor of my hometown for 13 years.
Wow.
And to be a member of the assembly for the last 13 years, consecutively while still doing my life as a pharmacist. And it's been great because you start to understand public policy, you start to understand why things work, and you also understand why things don't work. But you also get to meet a lot of great things that you just weren't aware of. And I have to say, in my top 5, in the 26 years in public life, 40 years in private sector life, our relationship with Donate Life and Donate Life RX has actually been one of the most positive. To step back, I've been an organ donor ever since I joined the assembly in my first year, when we had some debates on the floor, not against any bills of Donate Life, but about the importance of organ donation. I became a organ donor. But the interesting part is I must have been talking about at dinner one night, because my kids are young, but when she turned 16, I brought her to get her driver's license. And it was almost like on cue. She's about ready to do what you need to do at the DMV desk. And she turns, she goes, "Dad, if it's okay with you, I want to be an organ donor." I said, "Sophia, that's your decision." And it left an indelible mark on me. And then a couple years ago, last year, it was about this time, Asia and I were at a bipartisan assembly of the Senate, the Assembly, Republicans, the Democrats, whatever, all of us together, because we all support Donate Life. And I was listening to her talk about the continued push to increase organ donation. And when I heard the numbers, and I think they were below 50% at the time, I remember at the event saying, we should get together after, because I really want to understand how we, as a healthcare profession, and I think sometimes people don't, and John, you could probably agree or disagree on this, but sometimes they don't always look at pharmacists. I think now we looked at more as healthcare professionals, but that wasn't always the case. But we're the most accessible healthcare professional by far. Yeah. And I said, maybe there's a place where pharmacy can play a role. And we'll probably get into that further on, but that's a little bit about me.
Jeez, that's awesome. We really brought the heat today on This Week in Pharmacy. So, Aisha, that's very special. And I want you to kind of share a little bit about what's been happening with Donate Life, even recently, last year when you achieved a major health care milestone for when the first time the majority of age-eligible New Yorkers were registered organ and tissue donors, and kind of go into a little bit about what's been happening and how you're plugged into different facets of community pharmacy and pharmacists too.
Yeah, so we have had a tremendous amount of growth here in New York. And when I started here 13 years ago, I kind of laughed. I had nowhere to go but up, right? Because we were one of the worst performing registries in the country. We had the 3rd highest need. We still do. But, there was just so much that needed to be done. And one of the things that I saw was really important about, transforming New York and creating this change was we needed to create a culture of donation in New York, right? We really needed to normalize this topic, normalize the discussion, and we needed to bring this question to New Yorkers where they are, right? I wanted to get this topic in front of New Yorkers, not every day, every week, every month. I want them to have the opportunity to enroll in the New York State Donate Life Registry. I want them to get the messaging. I want them to hear the call to action, and from as many sources as I possibly can to create that culture of donation so that we get to a point where New Yorkers say, this is what we do for each other. We save each other's lives, right? So one of our greatest tactics in doing that was creating strategic partnerships. So we're a statewide organization, we're a nonprofit, we're small. I needed an army that was going to go out and be able to connect with New Yorkers every day and in every possible way, right? So we started doing things that no other states had been doing. So we created what we call doorways to donation. With the help of Assemblymember McDonald and so many of his peers and colleagues, we created all of these different doorways to donation where people could enroll in the registry. And from that, we created strategic partnerships. So we have here in New York, you can enroll in the registry as part of the voter registration process. No other state has that, right? So then we did a partnership with the League of Women Voters. We've included the question in hunting and fishing licenses and in, the New York State of Health Marketplace and all of these different places. We've created partnerships with the New York State Auto Dealers Association. And so fortunately, we have a lot of friends, and we have friends like Assemblymember McDonald who said, hey, what about the pharmacies? We reach and talk to New Yorkers by the millions every day. What if we did a partnership with the pharmacy community? There was clearly a synergy, right? A public health shared mission that, they serve the same audience, right? They're serving the same patients who are waiting for a life-saving transplant today. They're also making sure that transplant recipients have the medications they need to preserve and as a recipient, make sure that they keep that organ that has saved their life, right? So there seemed so much synergy, shared mission. It seemed like a natural fit. So we started putting together the pieces of what that would look like, doing registration drives, pushing this message out to New Yorkers through their social media and through, their communication channels. And John from Kinney can talk about that because they did an outstanding job this year. So, those are the types of things, and that's how these partnerships works. And that's the goal I'm trying to achieve with them.
I like hearing the tie-in to the community, and I mean, the stats are out there. What's the most accessible professional healthcare provider? It's our pharmacists throughout the community because they're part of the community. They're in the community. I don't really care what setting it is. The retail pharmacies, the independently owned pharmacies. It's the accessibility to healthcare that's the most important part. And some of those communities that are out there, not only that's the only source of healthcare that they have for miles and miles, but in other cases, some of those pharmacies are being closed up because of what we're experiencing in deserts. So I think of, McKinney, Kinney Drug, and what you're doing, John, and how you got involved and how the listeners that we have a huge listener base that are community pharmacy owners. So as a community pharmacy operator, active operator right now, talk to us about your involvement of being tied into this. What made you decide to be part of this initiative?
Todd, it's just easy, right? This is something that we use our network every day for whatever. You mentioned a public health crisis. Pharmacists got this country out of the COVID pandemic, right? We have the ability to really take the education and the commitment of our community pharmacists and how they are respected in the community. I view community pharmacies, again, it doesn't matter what's on the outside, whether it's an independent, a big chain, a small regional, a grocery store, no matter what it is. I think that community pharmacies are the front door to healthcare, right? They're the absolute front door. We're open, we're trusted, we're embedded in the neighborhoods. It's all about that powerful opportunity. And frankly, it's a responsibility that we have, right? We're out here, we're educating our patients about the medications they need. Why are we not taking the chance to talk about the gift of life? And I think it's just such a critical component in all of the involvement. And I don't want to act like this was a big monumental task for us. This was easy. This was just something that was just a real easy lift because we have the network, we have the resources, and we have everything available. So any chance we have to utilize our marketing, our brand, right? The brand is so important into the communities that we have the privilege to serve, and able to put the Kinney name to something like Donate Life RX. I'm hoping will bring an astronomical change in the amount of people that register for the registry.
Love it.
Me too.
Yeah. So when you think of the health of your community and people that are voting you into office, Representative McDonald, what are your hopes for the continuation for Donate RX and how your role will continue to impact this initiative?
Yeah, I look at this as one of those items, and just to go back to part of this, when I was asking Asia, tell me about who else are your partners. We know that our Department of Motor Vehicles, and that's something that there's a lot, people don't understand how many transactions go on with DMV on a regular basis, not only just when people sign up to get their license, but also renewals, registrations, whatever it may be. But then she was talking about the MTA down in New York City and some of the bus stops and things like that. And to John's point, we are one of the more accessible healthcare professionals. People will go to a pharmacy on average 13 times a year. That's just a conservative number. So, my hope is, do I expect all of a sudden to see this major surge? No, actually, I don't think so. I think we'll see I hope we get off to a good start, but I see this to be part of what's called continuous motion. In other words, this is something that we continue to do on a regular basis. I will tell you this, it's what's been exciting. We've got the T-shirts that Donate Life provided. We've gotten the wristbands. We've got the flyers, the decals. I'm going to be working on a poster because I saw a great one at the car dealers, which you have another great partnership with the car dealers. That's beautiful. But what's really kind of cool is our staff is excited. They like it. It's a different way to open up a conversation. I think from our healthcare profession, although most people know that we're kind human beings and we're trying to help people get better at life, I think it just adds another positive light to our profession and gives us another avenue to strengthen our relationship with our patients. I say this from a political perspective as a member of the assembly who, one foot in one door, one foot in the other door. But I tell my pharmacy colleagues on a regular basis, I get the genuine behind closed door conversations with my colleagues. They truly respect the work that pharmacies do. They know that pharmacists are the number 2 most trusted healthcare professional, just running behind nurses, but appropriately so. Nurses have a very difficult challenge. And the bottom line is elected officials, they know that people like pharmacists are great individuals to be associated with because they're able to really share what the average person's dealing with on a regular daily basis.
Yep.
And John, I think the message coming from our profession, to points made earlier by John, we're trusted. That's something that is important.
And I think the other point we have to add here is that our pharmacy teams, they're just connected, right? They're connected to that community more than anybody else, right? You walk into any pharmacy, and I could say you can walk into any of my pharmacies, and our pharmacists and our teams are really kind of engaged with the patients. They know that Mrs. Smith just had a grandbaby. They know that this one traveled to Florida for spring break. They really understand all of those dynamics of what goes on in someone's life. And it's really important that we have this opportunity to talk to them, because that 2-minute sign up on the registry could give somebody a second chance at their life. And what better way than that pharmacist that's friends with everybody, the technician that's friends with all of the customers, that knows their patients by name. What better way would it be for them to make this sort of impact? So it just makes sense. It really does.
I'll jump in, Todd, and say that what John was saying about his staff and how they find it so rewarding, that's universal. Like, regardless of the partner, whether you're an auto dealer, whether you're League of Women Voters, whether you're a healthcare partner, we find that, and DMV staff, that, talking about organ, eye, and tissue donation and encouraging people to enroll and having these really just, having the ability to the potential to save somebody else's life by having that conversation is incredibly rewarding. That's universal. And the other universal is that it doesn't matter what facets of the world you're in, again, cars, you name it, that there's always going to be, as soon as I talk to a group, there's always people in the crowd who are connected to the mission.
Yep.
And who raise their hand and say, my life was saved. My mother's was a donor, in the pharmacy community. Within a matter of a couple of weeks, we learned that there was a pharmacist out in Buffalo whose husband had a liver transplant. We learned that John at Kinney, that he had several employees who were impacted by the mission. It's just, when you talk about this topic, without a doubt, you always hear about how New Yorkers and across the country, you hear how people have been impacted by this mission. It's really important.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing it up. I'm glad we get an opportunity to share this with our listeners. I think that having pharmacists mention and talk with and share and be a guidance, and having Representative McDonald here as part of that as a pharmacist as well. This is special. I really want to thank, so expansion through the DMV, expansion through community pharmacy, through centers. What about I can imagine McKinney may have a long-term care division, may have, connections to a compounding pharmacy. Like there's other facets of pharmacy that our public doesn't necessarily think of right away, that there's these other outlets and connections. And then of course our hospital systems too. This is good. I kind of want advice from your perspective, leading Donate Life. What are some other ideas of spreading this message? And as an example is reaching out to your state representatives. It would be a wonderful way to get other states to be doing more, because you're kind of leading the way in really helping to leverage this through community pharmacy, Aisha. So kind of expand upon that too.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely, so I feel like we're just getting started, right? Guys, don't you agree? I mean, we just did this for the first time. And so we have about 15 pharmacies. We have 4 out of 6 universities. So I think there's a lot more potential with this collaboration and this partnership. And each year we'll just get better and better. But to your point, yeah, there's a lot of, there's a lot of expansion there. In terms of, from a policy perspective and how we're bringing this question to New Yorkers, with John's help, we have passed legislation in the last couple of years to incorporate the opportunity to enroll in the New York State Donate Life Registry with your private health insurance applications and renewals. We will be the first state in the nation to do that. It's a lot of work on our part, but it is, we're going to be leaders in that, thanks to their help, in the legislature and the governor's office. And we're also the first in the nation that we are going to be putting the opportunity to enroll in the electronic health record. So these are things that are coming online in the next, year and a half. We're building the technology right now to facilitate that. We're working with the various different software companies and with the private health insurance plans to do that. So we're really excited about those things. Listen, when you have the worst registry in the nation, you've got to get really creative and really innovative, right? So we leave no stone unturned, as they say.
Well, I was excited to read the Politico coverage just recently. This article is titled "The Push to Create Equity in New York's Organ Transplant System." You got to be pretty proud of this, to get this feature and get this kind of coverage. So talk to us a little bit about, uncovering from a public's perspective and a national perspective, kind of being a leader in expanding this throughout the states.
Well, actually, Todd, this is where we're playing catch up. I feel like in so many places we're leader, and in so many places I'm trying to play catch up. And in this case, we're playing catch up. So 35 years ago, New York put on the books a prohibition so that patients can only, and not to get too deep in the technicalities here, but they can only list as a patient or candidate at one transplant center. Whereas the practice nationally is that you can do something called multi-list. You can list it more than one transplant center. And so here we're an anomaly again here in New York. And so the Helping Equal Access to Registration for Transplant, the HEART Act, we call it, is to repeal that ban. It is, it's again, where we're an anomaly. It conflicts with national policies, and hands down, it will absolutely increase New Yorkers' ability to get transplanted. It reduces wait time by half. It increases the rate of transplantation, doubles the rate. So it's an important policy, and we are really proud of it. And hopefully, we'll get it through the process this year, right, John? No pressure.
You got it. Nope, you got it. Hey, when we get our budget done, anything can happen. Let's just get the budget done.
I know. Well, we're doing this too on the budget.
$1 million.
This has been wonderful. I want to just give you guys a shout out for taking your time to share with our pharmacy community and podcast listeners on This Week in Pharmacy. Definitely, I would love to have you back and giving us an update of how this is kind of increasing. And then, Aisha, I would love to have you talk with other state officials who are executive directors that are doing similar things to get the increase of people donating organs during times that is medical ready and connected in. But then also let's talk about how to get the state pharmacy associations kind of talking with us of how this could become a major source of public health stewardness and authenticity of communication to the communities too that these community pharmacies are serving.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for this opportunity. And we wouldn't be here without John at Kinney and Assemblymember McDonald, who was really the inspiration for this whole thing. And both of them have been tremendous leaders. So thank you so much for everything you've done to help us.
But let's just not underscore, Asia, the work you and Donate Life have done.
Agreed.
Todd, to put this in perspective, as much as we're excited and it's a good thing to do, it's the right thing to do, her team has made it very easy. Today, in this day and age, with your phone, you just need to scan the code, you're connected to the registry, they're tracking it to see how well it's going. I mean, this is such it's not a heavy lift for pharmacies. Like I said, we're very frequent. We're kind of in people's way, right? On a daily rate. So, Asia, tip of the hat to your team. You guys you've really made it work. And I think that's the important part too. But hey, listen, there's always more people that are welcome to jump in the pool with us, because there's plenty of water and plenty of waves to conquer.
Yeah, that's right.
For our listeners, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the website. It's donatelifenys.org. Once again, that's donatelifenys.org. And if you go to the register section, you'll be able to actually register if you are one of the 8 million New Yorkers or plus of those members, joining those members. I'm excited to have this as part of This Week in Pharmacy, and like I said, I hope to have everyone back to give us an update. So thank you.
Sounds great.
Will do.